Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Decennial Committee, which happens only every 10 years. So it's a historical moment, right? Okay. And we are going to start with the identification of the required decennial committee members as requested by the committee chair and township supervisor. And I'm going to turn it over to City Clerk Leslie Yoakum to introduce those members.
All right, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of treat this as a roll call. When I read your name, if you will turn your mic on and just respond accordingly. Committee Member Kearns. Here. Committee Member Bolin. Here. Committee Member Montney is out. Committee Member Dannenberg.
Here.
Committee Member Becker.
Here.
Committee Member Hendricks.
Here.
We have Ward out. Committee Member Lee also out. Committee Member Crumpler.
Here.
Committee Member Millawambwe.
Here.
Committee Member Skillrood.
Here.
Committee Member Scudder.
Here.
Committee Member Gibson.
Here.
Committee Member Thauget. Committee Member Williams.
Here.
Committee Member, and actually that's it. I apologize. We can go ahead and move on, I believe. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item B, consideration action to identify and approve the appointment of residents to serve on the committee as requested by the committee chair and township supervisor. So.
Let me do that. Okay.
Yes.
So as you've read in your memo, pursuant to the 50 ILCS 70/10, at least 2 residents living in the township are or shall be included on the committee. We have 3, and I'd like to present Pastor William Bennett, who is present today, and David Stanzik and Amelia Burgess.
Okay. And this is something we have to vote on, right? Okay. So are we ready to vote? Oh, yes, motion.
I move to approve the appointments.
Okay. And a second? Not all at once?
I'll second.
Thank you.
All right,
call
so
the roll.
we've got Committee Member Hendricks making the motion, Committee Member Bolin seconding, and I will do a quick roll call. Councilmember Kearns. Yes. Councilmember Bolin.
Yes.
Councilmember Dannenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Becker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hendricks.
I
Yes.
mean, trustee. Or
Oh, I'm saying
committee
council,
member.
aren't I?
Yes.
I have committee on my paper, I promise. Okay, so adapt all of that to committee member. Okay, committee, where are we at? Committee Member Crumpler.
Yes.
Committee Member Millawambwe.
Yes.
Committee Member Skillrood.
Yes.
Committee Member Scudder.
Yes.
Committee Member Gibson.
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
There
Okay,
you go.
thank you. And you're now official.
Would you like to join us?
Yes. There are no consent agenda items, so we're gonna move to the next item on the agenda for the regular session. And we're going to start with an overview of the Decennial Committee, and I'm gonna turn it over to Township Supervisor Skillroot to give us an overview.
I'm sure you've read it several times, right? This meeting, the beginning of this meeting was to adjourn before June 10th, as state statute indicates. And we've done that today. We're supposed to meet at least 3 times. You'll see in your notes that we've made them quarterly through the 18 months. That doesn't mean that it has to go the 18 months, but giving time in between to not overburden the committee and nor overburden whoever's going to be working and preparing the report. And then we are to write the report on recommendations on increased accountability, what our efficiencies are and what could be more efficient. and then file the report with the county board and the county chair actually by November 25th, 2024.
Sounds good.
This is an unfunded mandate from the state. It is the first one,
Yeah.
and we will not be here for the next one. I'm certain of it. So
Hey, speak for yourself. You never know.
I'm not gonna be here.
Okay. And I saw from the documents that you sent that there is a kind of a format, right, to follow for the reports, which makes it nice. At least it's somewhat prescribed.
The format was created by township officials of Illinois, and it was to kind of help navigate this law that's put into place. And so it's a template. It doesn't mean we have to stick with that template.
Mhm.
We can, it can be as simple as complex as we all want to make
Mhm.
it, but it is the whole committee's decision on what we do.
Yeah.
I have volunteered our staff to pull together information and
Thank you.
yes. And I mean, there's a lot to it. There's reading statutes, there's
Mhm.
understanding the audit, there's, doing a lot of different things with it. So
Yeah. I'm not sure if the staff is excited, but we are.
we're prepared.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, sounds good. Any questions from committee members? No? Okay. Good, awesome. So we're gonna move on to the next item was a review of the meeting schedule. Deb?
As I had just mentioned, it's quarterly meetings. They'll be at 5 o'clock prior to the township board meeting. And I hope that you'll all be able to make those on a regular basis. And again, we won't have to complete it if we're finished with the report sooner than that. Any questions about that?
All right, thank you. So next item on the agenda is the general discussion of and identification of next steps.
I wanted to share something that Leslie and I were going through this week. It's today Monday. Last week. It's been a long weekend. We thought that a lot of this information can be put on SharePoint. I believe that you use it and we're going to adapt to it as best as we can. And so I have a meeting with Phil, I think he's back there, on Tuesday to work through the details of setting up a page and getting that going, because a lot of the statutes can be put right on that, any of the laws that are in effect. Any documentation, we can communicate that way. And so I think that's a good start to all being on the same page and getting what we need instead of paper copies. I do plan on our office having one full paper copy of whatever we do and put together as a report, so that 10 years down the road, when they do this again, they can have a really good format for that. So, and how involved we get is up to you, and how much you and all of us together to show what we do and how we do it, whether we do it well in your eyes or whether we do it and we need improvements. I mean, we'll start with gathering information that's shown in the template, such as intergovernmental agreements, shared agreements, things that we're doing, we believe, successfully. And then certainly there may be things that you question that we'll work through. I will need some input from the committee on what other types of things that you'll want to see if it's not on the template already. So we'll just have to dive into that in the next meeting. This is sort of an organizational meeting. If somebody wants to step up and do any of the items that are listed in that template, you're certainly welcome to volunteer. So
I'm seeing a rush to the mic here.
well, the other thing is we need to determine as a committee whether we want an outside source to write this report. It is an unfunded mandate. It would cost a good amount of money to have like ISU do it if they're available to do it. I don't know any other resources, I figured we could consider taking a stab at it if you want. At the town, the staff and then with your input. I don't think that has to be made right this moment,
Mhm,
that
mhm.
decision. We're still in the beginning stages of it, so.
Yeah. Okay. Where would the report go once it's done?
It'll go to the county clerk
County
and the
clerk,
county
okay.
chair.
County
That's
chair,
where it's
okay.
recommended.
And
to
that's
go.
where it's gonna.
It's
stay,
required to go to the county clerk.
and that's where it's.
And I
gonna stay.
believe that legislation then has an opportunity to pull it at any time
Mhm.
that they would need it,
Okay.
And this, and I want to make sure you understand, this is not just for townships. This is all taxing bodies, local government or local taxing bodies.
Mhm,
They're all having to do the same thing,
mhm,
except for municipalities and counties.
mhm.
So
Okay. Okay, sounds good. When
What-
is our, oh, go ahead.
What does the county board do with it after they get it?
file it. It's available to the public if they want to see it,
Okay,
Mhm.
but they file it
okay.
Yeah.
I guess they're the
in the legislature.
records management
Yeah,
people.
I said that they could see it, view it.
Hmm.
Yeah, the state legislators, they can all view it at that point and pull it if they need it. But that's even including all the rural townships and all the rural mosquito abatements and drainage. I don't know. There's a lot of different things and highway commissioners and multi-group assessors. I mean, they're getting into all forms of government other than municipalities and county.
When is our next meeting? The date, the actual date?
The date,
August 20th?
August 28th.
Yeah. Okay,
Every 3 months.
okay, yeah, wanted to make a mental note.
So we can decide here at this meeting, we have 5 minutes, what our next steps are. Do we want to pull information together that we have and formulate it and give you some things on SharePoint to go over first? Or do you want us to describe what we do and give a presentation on that? I'm not sure quite where to begin, but I don't think it's just directed by me by any means.
Okay.
I think, if you all put together some sort of working draft that you could put on SharePoint that we could access, I think that would be really helpful.
Mhm.
I don't know what others think.
Any other comments? We can do that.
I think silence is acquiescence, I guess. Wow, did you like how I did that? It just kind of rhymed a little bit.
I do want to introduce you to the board members for the cemetery. Joe Gibson, Brad Williams,
Yeah.
Garrett Thalgett is not here today.
They look vaguely familiar.
And then Pastor Bennett is here from City of Refuge. So,
Yeah.
and
Also
then
looks very vaguely familiar.
Dave Stanzik, another resident, has been our moderator for
Mhm.
Township, and
Mhm.
he has also been an attorney for Township. Amelia Burgess has been an attorney in the community, but she's been on the cemetery board and as a trustee. So,
If they were both here, I would say they look vaguely familiar.
yeah, it's a big group, but
Yes.
Can I ask another question? Looking ahead where it says our committee's recommendations regarding increased accountability and efficiency, whatever the committee comes up with, is there do we have to plan to reach those
those
goals?
goals.
Or is there any kind of accountability or review of those recommendations?
I would say the committee does not re-engage in conversations once the report has been filed. But I'm certain that Township will look at the efficiencies or the goals and move forward with that. To the best of our ability.
Yes. Okay, it doesn't look like there is any other person who would like to speak. So we're gonna move on to the next item, which is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We received no public comment.
Okay, sounds good. And so I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, and second by Councilmember Becker. All those in favor? Yes, sorry, committee members say aye. Okay, nay, no, okay, all right. We're good, we adjourn. Thank you all very much. Successful first meeting. And we have 2 minutes for Township. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the City of Bloomington Township. If everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Kearns,
Here.
trustee Bolin,
Here.
and trustee Dannenberger,
Here.
trustee Becker,
Here.
trustee Hendricks,
Here.
trustee Lee,
Here.
trustee Crumpler,
Here.
trustee Milliwample.
Here. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have public comment?
We did not have anyone register for public comment nor email public comment.
Okay, thank you. And next item, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion to approve this consent agenda.
Okay,
Second.
okay, trustee Bolin, and then trustee Becker has a second. Do we we're voting on this iPad, right? Okay. Mine is not showing up. Can no, as a trustee, I do vote. Yeah, but I'm not seeing it here. I'm not seeing the next step here. Yeah. Mine is still saying, do I click on the item? Is that what I do? No. Or maybe you assume that I wouldn't. You see what they try to do to me?
So it never popped up for you?
No, it never did. I can do by vote by voice, right? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is I can also populate it per item too, if we want to test it.
Yeah.
We have 5A rep right now. So if I say record. So I put you voted yay. Okay.
That's a big assumption.
There is. Thank you.
Oh, I know.
And let's try this. Can we do a motion? We'll do these each individually. Do a motion for 5B separately, and we'll do one for 5C just so that we can kind of test them if you guys
Okay.
don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
I move to,
No, go ahead.
I move to approve consent agenda item 5B.
Second.
Okay.
He's there. Not on, okay.
Nothing. Yep, nothing. Okay.
Trustee Milliwamble,
Yes.
thank you. Okay. And if we could move on to 5C.
Motion?
I move to approve consent agenda 5C.
Second,
All right.
Oh, I clicked it.
Uh-oh,
That was my fault.
as the motion
Oh,
fails.
that was mine. Right, let's see. Now, and trustee Milawambe,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. Awesome. Oof, I'm exhausted. Okay, we're gonna move on to so no regular session item, and so we're gonna move on to a report by elected officials, and we'll start with Township Supervisor Skillroot.
We're tired at our office. There's a lot going on. Building renovations are being worked on. We're trying to secure several different things at once and such as the movers, storage, data cabling, things like that. So, but it's going well. The other thing that's extremely busy at this point is the POTS recycle program. So we have 6 plus our office sites where horticulture pots and trays can be collected. One we may move because it's not very active and except for garbage, and we don't want the garbage there. So, but it's going very well, very busy time. So, I really don't have anything else to report other than a reminder that at the Evergreen Memorial Cemetery is the ceremony at the mausoleum. I think that's at noon. And then there's an unveiling of a plaque for the Revolutionary War soldier David Haggard on Sunday, June 11th at 1:30. That's supposed to be pretty exciting unveiling of it. So, and I really don't have anything else unless you have questions.
Trustee Boland and Crumpler.
I don't have any questions. I just want you to know I posted on Nextdoor
For recycling?
for the pots.
Thank you.
program. I put the link.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We literally are out 2 days a week right now. Full U-Haul, 15-foot, like can't even close the doors. We're that full. So, and we try to organize some of it just so we have more maximum space in there. It was a busy day. So I think we need more people over there, but
Awesome. Trustee Crumpler.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb, for this report. Just real quickly, I noticed that in April, 97 applicants sought township service. Is that typical for this time of year, or is that more or less than previously? Could you
I
just-
think over time it's decreased a little bit. Ever since we're rebuilding from COVID,
Right.
and we're staying very consistent at this point at that level. I don't think, I don't have anything, like, I don't have any understanding of why it is where it is. I believe the jobs are out there and
Mhm.
hopefully there are more working than there are utilizing township assistance. However, I do want to say that emergency assistance has increased. And that emergency assistance is for the working lower income individuals. And that has, so if you see denials, if you look at I can tell you for a second, if you look at it's on the back page of my supervisor's report is the statistics. And you can see the denials are 40 on that first section. That's because we always have to deny general assistance if they can move into emergency assistance. So it kind of skews the number a little, but it's still an active case. You have to do something with it in general assistance, then move it on to emergency assistance. And we had 14 grants served in emergency assistance and only 4 denials. A lot of those probably went to the HERE program as well, or moved on because their numbers were so large, we couldn't help them. Then they would move on to the IDHPA. Okay, it's the state funding for additional mortgage money. I can't remember the acronym, sorry.
That's okay. No. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Township Supervisors, Assessor, Skirwood. No, sorry.
Here's better.
All day. Scudder.
Hey. I don't have much to report on other than some of the things, comments that Deb made about the planning for the building renovations and the Decennial Committee. But I am currently starting to look for replacements for appraisal staff that we lost in the past few months and get those positions filled in the office. So I got a lot of different things going on other than just getting the assessments ready for 2023. So if you know anybody that's interested in exciting career in assessments, we're at 607 South Grid.
You're a great salesman. What are the general requirements, or what kind of background you're looking for generally?
Real estate, commercials, more in-depth learning with income approaches and things. Residential, realtors might be interested, or appraisers, mainly appraisers. Maybe assessments outside of the city. We might have to recruit outside of Bloomington to fill those positions, but if there's anyone locally, we're
Okay. And
right downtown.
yeah, where is it? Is it going to be posted somewhere, like the website?
It'll be on assessment sites, IAAO, International Assessment
Mhm.
Organization. And then IPIA is right here in Bloomington. It's a state assessment education page
Okay.
for now, and maybe some others as I start
Okay.
seeking out.
Okay. Yep. So if you send it to us, we will pass it around then.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, second. Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, okay. We are adjourned, so we'll see you in about 12.5 minutes. Everyone, the time is now 6 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this, the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. And I'm going to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Kearns. Here. Councilmember Bolin. Here. Councilmember Dannenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Becker.
Here.
Councilmember Hendricks.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Mayor Millawamble.
Here. And Councilmember Montney is attending remotely due to work, so I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to allow her to participate remotely.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bolin, second by Councilmember Becker.
All right, Councilmember Kearns,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Dannenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Hendricks,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay. Can we check if Councilmember Montney is on?
I can hear you, and thank you so much for allowing me to participate remotely.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have public comment?
We do. We received emailed public comment from Noah Tang and Crystal Abel that was provided to all of council before the meeting. And then we have, let's see, 8 people registered to speak.
Okay.
And we'll get started after your statement with first up, let's see here, Matthew Tosco, then to follow Janae Clark.
Okay. Thank you. Public comment is an opportunity for speakers to provide their views and feedback to the city council. It is also an opportunity for the city council to listen and hear diverse points of view. To maximize the impact of public comment and show respect for the expression of all views, speakers should maintain civility and focus on city issues. Speakers must identify themselves for the record, but are not required to give their address. Each speaker is given the floor for 3 minutes, and the council does not respond or engage in debate. Any speaker that engages in threatening or disorderly behavior will be deemed out of order and their time ceased. So at about 3 minutes, I will stop people, not to be rude or anything, but just to remain consistent. So we can start with the first speaker.
First up, we have Matthew Tosco.
Hi, I'm Matt Tosco and I live in Ward 6. I'm also a member of the Bloomington Normal Club of the Communist Party USA. More new luxury apartments are not necessary around here, and it's an insult to the people of Ward 6 to even consider this crap, let alone consider the city covering 25% of the costs so some private landlord can pocket the profits. Money that would be better spent on public subsidized and/or affordable housing to alleviate our crisis level 4,200 unit deficit and horrendous Section 8 housing waiting times. Affordable is a completely skewed metric, especially for a lot of the people in Ward 6, as it's based on the entire city's average median income. More realistically and equitably, affordable should be defined as no more than a minimum wage earner can pay without going over 30% of their income, or that rent burdened level. If this city is going to chip in 25% of the cost to build this, it should be required that 25% of the units be affordable to at least our community's lowest wage earners, about $575 a month. If this city is going to chip in at all, 100% union labor should be used in the construction, not like that Hacienda Leon debacle in Uptown Normal. If either of those requirements cuts into my profit margins too much, well, I say that 4.5 million can be better spent for the people of Ward 6 on other things. If trickle-down housing worked any better than trickle-down economics, Bloomington would be awash in affordable housing. The data-driven facts are that both are pretty sound in scams to move wealth straight to the top at the expense of everyone else. But they'll shop at our businesses. It's just capitalists helping out other capitalists while ignoring the basic needs of Ward 6's working class. This reeks of bold-faced gentrification. Absolute shame on this council if it allows this crap to pass as is. On a final note, screw Airbnbs altogether. Keeping units out of the residential housing market for use as cash cow vacation convenience spots while in the midst of an ongoing affordable housing shortage should be illegal, and those with those ambitions should just get out of town. Approving any of those units for Airbnb purposes is downright disgusting. Also, since I got a couple minutes or seconds, why don't y'all fix our roads already? Thank you.
Next.
Next up, we'll have Janae Clark, and then to follow Zach Carlson.
Hello. My name is Janae Clark. I'm Ward 6. And pretty much everything he said, I'm just going to say it again. So I've heard that at any given time, we have over 4,000 people in Bloomington Normal searching for affordable housing. How many people in Ward 6 are struggling to pay their rent? If you go door to door and you're not campaigning and talk to them, you'll find out that there's quite a few. And we have 100 businesses in downtown Bloomington? Who's benefiting from the luxury apartment deal? Well, Ward 6 Representative Cody Hendricks said this: we are going to see individuals who live in those apartments and townhomes. They're going to be frequenting downtown. They're going to be frequenting restaurants and businesses. They're going to be going to community events. They're going to be going to the Castle Theater and other locations for music. They're going to be part of that downtown hub, which is going to help all of our business owners just as much as down here. So how does that benefit the existing residents of Ward 6 that aren't business owners, which is the majority of them? Residents that can't afford to frequent downtown restaurants and those things mentioned because rent is so outrageously high. I'd like someone to explain how subsidies for a developer to build these luxury apartments is in the best interest of those in this ward. How is city money best spent giving it to someone who doesn't need it, the developer? It's like, here's some money, take it and build luxury apartments that people that need it can't afford. I mean, doesn't that sound incredibly shitty when you put it like that? The developer will profit, and it seems at the very least, an apartment complex that would house people in need should be a priority. Luxury and Airbnb are the opposite of that. It seems to be very out of touch to believe with the current housing crisis that people struggling to pay rent to say it's a good idea, let alone awesome, to subsidize luxury apartments. In my opinion, it's morally reprehensible. Affordable apartments would also allow residents that would frequent downtown, because guess what? They could afford to. I'm sure people would get behind subsidies if that were the case. Just remember, the developer did not vote for you to represent them. We did, and this is not in our best interest. Oh, I'm also representing the Communist Party. Thank you.
All right, next up we have Zach Carlson, and then to follow Andy Kaufman.
All right, my name is Zach Carlson, also from Ward 6. I didn't expect all three of us to go in a row because I have the same thing. Down to the math, minimum wage here, by the way, for those who don't make it, is after taxes about $1,900, $1,950 or so. That's who we're talking about. But I wanted to shift a little bit differently to a different angle with this, because I haven't seen the details of what they're going to be charging of what luxury is. I said 1,500 per townhomes a month seemed appropriate. 1,000 per apartment seemed appropriate for, luxury, which turns out to $250,000 a month once they're all filled. A year, that's $3 million. That pays off in 6 years. Of course, there's maintenance, there's labor, there's payroll, so on and so forth, taxes. So if we're give them half, that's 12 years. And that's pure profit, 3 million a year. And that's low numbers. Like, let's be real. The luxury townhomes near ISU where I work, and the luxury apartments there, that is $7,800 per person, and that's for 4 people. So when you do the math, that is $3,200 for a student apartment. That ain't cool. So what I came here to suggest is that any theory that we should look at making it affordable, that anything that gets put forward to this project needs to include union labor, needs to have affordable housing in it. And it needs to actually benefit downtown and the community, right? I love the style, the place. I don't like the price point. I don't like the luxury. People, as was said, are hurting this town, and we need the housing stock. And this is one great way to do it, but we can't do it at such a high price points. The idea of this trickle down housing is that people who are in lower income areas or lower rents will move up because they can afford it. But because they can afford it, then they have less disposable income, which then spends less in town. And those who currently aren't looking for a home, will get those lower places, but then they can't. And they don't have as much disposable income, so then they won't spend as much. That's just the simple idea of the velocity of money. It's a pretty sound economic principle. And honestly, I don't know what the next 30 minutes when we get to it of comments going to be between city managers and economics and all that fun stuff. I really wish I could hear them before I could speak. I hope there's maybe another round. We can talk about this some more discussion. Now I'll just leave it with, don't let a historian do an economist's job. It never ends out well. I'm usually right. So thank you.
All right, next up, we have Andy Kaufman, and then to follow Shelley Garland. The order is not determined. The order is not determined by the way that it's registered. It's done at random. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Andy Kaufman, and I, along with Robbie Osenga, are actually the partners in this development that's being considered, or the incentive agreement is being considered on tonight's agenda. Thank you for considering this. There are 4 points that we'd like to address. I'm going to address 2 of them, and Robbie will be addressing 2 others. But we first of all want to thank the mayor and the city council who have acknowledged that one of their primary goals of local government is to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens by encouraging private investment in industry, business, and housing in order to enhance the city's tax base, improve blight, and provide job opportunities for its residents. Also to the city staff, and in particular, Tim, Billy, Jeff, Melissa, and Ellen, who have been in the weeds with us pursuing this meaningful development and project for our downtown. We want to thank you. I also would like to address then these 2 things. One, schedule. Robbie and I have been working on this project for several years and have been actively working with the city for the last 8 months to get us here tonight. It is our intent to continue moving forward on construction of this project by this fall. And we are walking into your decision tonight with open hands, trusting that if you, as our elected officials, see fit to approve this project, that we can meet that construction kickoff date, and this timeline makes this project viable. Should you see that this project not be best for our community and/or delay in a manner that prevents this fall start, then our performer cannot support this delay And unfortunately, the project would no longer be viable. So regarding prevailing wage, my second point, prevailing wage in union and local workforce. So there is a bit of a misnomer surrounding the phrase prevailing wage, but in essence, some in the community may be asking to whether this project will leverage the local labor force, union or otherwise. The Tax Increment Allocation Development Act of the state of Illinois does not include a prevailing wage or union requirement, and it is our intent to move forward on this project, inviting all local trades, both union and non-signatory, to participate on the work. We know that it will undoubtedly result in a combination of both union and non-signatory contractors delivering this project, just as it did on the nearly complete Northwestern Mutual building. Again, thank you to each of the council members for your consideration, and thank you to the city staff for all you've done and are doing to encourage investment in the redevelopment of our downtown.
Next up, we have Shelley Garland, and then to follow Mike Rakes.
Hello, I'm Shelley Garland. I also am in Ward 6, but I feel like maybe I'm speaking for a lot of individuals too. And I also would like to make a couple of quick comments about the approval and the consideration of some of the new developments, just because I have a couple different perspectives that I look at them from. And I know that we kind of heard a little bit about what does luxury mean, and I've heard about the North Morris apartments and how they're going to be starting at $1,200 to $1,400 a month for 1 and 2 bedrooms apartments. And they're like, hey, that's market rent. And maybe it is for our market right now, but fair market rent, which is determined by HUD, is about three to almost $400 lower than that. And so the perspective that I look at it from is I work in the housing choice voucher department, and I work for, maybe some of you know it as Section 8, but I see a lot of families, 650 of them actually, being priced out of, all the new units and the new developments that are available. And so during campaigning, I heard people talk about affordable housing and, a great place to raise your family and a great place to raise your kids. But I feel like if we're allowing and supporting all of these all the time, that we're not really looking at those individuals that are already part of our community and that want to continue to grow here, and that they come here for good opportunities, whether it's the new work, that is available for everyone else. So, with the average renter even, it's difficult for anyone to find something that, is within a budget, not even, minimum wage per se. It's even over that. It's hard for people to find things. So to hear luxury and to hear, these rent prices that we're going to be starting off at is definitely a disappointing a thing, for everyone in the community, especially, individuals on my side of town. So, so it's really kind of more about, maybe not, yes, building new things or supporting new, housing, but really just kind of looking at, supporting or increasing the idea of more moderately priced rentals for the average person in the community. So, thank you.
Next up, we have Mike Rakes, and then to follow Troy Zelznick.
Good evening. My name is Mike Rakes. I live and work both in Bloomington. I'm also the president of the Livingston and McLean County Construction Trades. I'm here to voice my opposition to item 8A on the regular agenda concerning the ordinance for 402 East Washington. I voiced my opposition for the thousands of construction workers that reside in our community. How can it be there are no labor standards language in the agreement? However, there's specific language in the ordinance, section 2H, where it makes clear that the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act does not apply. I spoke to the assistant director of the Illinois Department of Labor this morning, and I was told that a public body can include language in a TIF to comply with the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act. Just recently, the state passed the Blue Collar Jobs Act, which are tax incentives that require contractors, developers, and owners to comply with the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act. Property is scarce and the values of property have skyrocketed over the last couple of years. The best agreement is to sell a piece of property for $1 and give back over $4.5 million of taxpayer funds to the owner, then not think it be a good idea to include provisions to ensure construction workers are paid area standard wages and benefits and omit requirements for the use of Department of Labor apprenticeship programs? The buzzword in business circle is workforce development, which are apprenticeships. We see local businesses, Rivian, Ferraro, as well as Heartland Community College beginning to start them. Mayor, congratulations on your appointment to the Illinois Workforce and Innovation Board. In a recent interview, I quote you, "I look forward to collaborating with my colleagues to create advanced strategies that empower Illinois workers, enhance skills training programs, and drive economic growth in our state." End quote. The union construction trade programs are just that. They empower workers, enhance skills, and drive economic growth. We, the union trades, have a workforce development program that has been in place for years, is proven to work, and everyone is trying to emulate it. I ask, why would the use of requiring contractors to utilize Department of Labor approved apprenticeships not be included in this agreement? There are 2 projects currently under similar TIF agreements in Bloomington. What do we see on these jobs? We see roofers from Streator, plumbers from Peoria, metal workers from Arthur, demo companies that we're not even sure where they're from. All these contractors have a couple things in common. They don't employ local construction workers. They pay workers less than area standard wages and benefits, and they do not participate in Department of Labor approved apprenticeship programs. Members of the council, mayor, I urge you to vote against this proposal tonight. As a resident of Bloomington, I'm tired of seeing owners and developers receive taxpayer incentives, which line their pockets, and then they turn around and hire out of area cheap labor. That model doesn't empower workers, enhance skills, or drive economic growth. Thank you.
Next up, we have Troy Zelznick, and then last we'll have Robbie Osinga.
Zalesnik. So I live near the mall. I don't know what word that is. I'm a student out at Heartland, and recently the county chairs came to Heartland for our poli sci club, and all 3 of them parroted like the same kind of notion that the youths in our country and community are just kind of apathetic about like politics and governance. So I'm just here to kind of parrot what a lot of everyone else is saying. We don't need luxury apartments. This entity, the city council, lifted the moratorium far too soon during COVID, and I am one of the people that you are responsible for evicting. So yeah, I'm gonna assume that none of you rent, so I will assume that this council is incapable of representing me in that form. But we don't need these. If we got $4 million to hand to him and his buddy, we got $4 million to hand to the people in this community who actually fucking need it.
All right, last up, we have Robbie Osinga.
Hello, my name is Robbie Osinga, and I, with my business partner, Andy Kaufman, both born and raised here in this community, serve as managers of 402 East Washington LLC and have the incentive agreement being considered on tonight's agenda. We want to start off by thanking the city council and city staff for your proactive work in positioning this tract of land for redevelopment by establishing the Washington Street redevelopment project area back in 2018 as a TIF district. Your investment to engage with a local architect to produce conceptual renderings for this site, combined with the city's economic development staff working diligently to invite and assist developers such as ourselves to consider this project, is the reason we are standing here tonight. In preparation for tonight's vote on this matter, we felt it prudent to address a few matters. I will speak to 2 of those. The first is the historical structure. We have worked closely with the City of Refuge Church as they've been pursuing a new location for their congregation. They listed this property for sale over 2 years ago, hoping that this will allow them to focus their time and, more importantly, their fiscal resources on fulfilling their mission as a church body, and less on the ongoing maintenance and burden that this facility has become to them. You need to know that we recognize and respect that the church building on site has historical significance, and we do want to honor over 130 years of God's faithfulness to our community through his people who have met in this place for a place of worship. We fully intend to honor this faithfulness in our community and its building's rich history as part of our project design, and we will work to make the opportunity for approved historical preservationists to salvage any historical building materials prior to the raising of the structure. In regards to market rate or luxury rent, according to the regional housing market analysis prepared on April of 2022 by the Bloomington Normal EDC, it documented that there is both a lack of multifamily product differentiation and a lack of growth in the young professional segment in our community. In particular, with the exception of one Uptown Circle and Normal, there has been no new higher density infill development or greenfield development with higher quality design elements or competitive amenities. Though the increasing employment opportunities that have come to our community will no doubt drive growth in this population segment, investments in quality of place and housing diversification, we believe will help improve the competitiveness of our community to attract and retain the young, talented, and mobile workforce that are increasing in much larger numbers in other growing Midwestern markets. Our intent is to develop this property to both meet the growing housing demands and to do so in a manner that provides the design aesthetics, walkable urban sense of place, and amenities that young professional market is asking for, which we know inevitably will price the rents for these units at or near the top of market rate. Again, thank you, members of the council, for your consideration, and thank you, city staff, for all you have done and are doing to encourage investment in our downtown. Thank you.
There's no further public comment.
Okay. See. So the next item on the agenda is recognition and appointments, and we're going to start with a presentation of the City of Bloomington Police Department's Officers Commission Certificate to Officer Molly Monahan upon completion of the probationary period as requested by the Administration Department. Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy City Manager, and elected officials. Thank you for this opportunity to present this evening. Officer Molly Monahan was hired in June of 2018, spending 3 years at the police department as a community service officer at the front desk of the police department. On June 28, 2021, Officer Monahan became a police officer. She grew up in Atlanta, Illinois, and attended Olympia High School, where she graduated in May of 2009. Officer Monahan, who's very family oriented, is a daughter, sister, aunt, and dog mom to Chloe Bug and Matilda. She's joined today with her mother, her sister, her nephew, and friends who have been very supportive in her endeavor in law enforcement. While off duty, she spends time with her family, summertime events, and being outdoors. Prior to joining the Bloomington Police Department, Officer Monahan worked for the McLean County State's Attorney's Office from 2015 to 2018. She first served as a felony clerk and later in the Victim Witness Division. She was praised by her supervisor, especially for her work as a victim advocate, specifically for elderly victims. Her passion for serving others is always apparent. She currently serves on the Community Engagement Unit assigned to the Neighborhood Focus Team, responsible for sex offender compliance. She is very active as a field recruiter and loves participating in events throughout this community, from coffee and custard with a cop to neighborhood walks to sexual assault awareness walk, amongst others. She is one of our star officers. Officer Monahan received a letter of commendation for her teamwork in July of 2022. The involved officers were able to effect several arrests and seize large quantity of controlled substances. Officer Monahan recently completed her probation following her 14-week police academy stay, earning her Illinois police officer certification and completing the 12-week field training program. It is an honor and a privilege to present Officer Monahan with her commission this evening. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Officer Monahan, and we definitely appreciate your service already and look forward to many more years with the City of Bloomington. This is certainly a challenging time to be in law enforcement, and we really appreciate your commitment, dedication to law enforcement. Okay. Oh, I do not have a certificate. Mhm. We don't have it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't have it. Do we have it somewhere?
Chief, her commission certificate, does she have it already? Okay,
Okay.
all right, we will get that to her. The mayor doesn't have it. That's why I was checking with him too. So apologies for that, and we'll get it to her.
We can
Thank you. It is in the,
substitute it for handshake with the mayor. I don't know.
that's right, a picture with the mayor. We also do have, it was in the council packet too, if anybody's interested in seeing it publicly. It is there also, so.
Okay, so we have a series of proclamations that I'm going to read. Just exercise my reading muscles. So we're going to start with a National Public Works Week. And appropriately, we're having a pretty big presentation, right, today? Yeah, so that'll be awesome. So whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Bloomington, Illinois. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our residents. And whereas it is in the public interest for the residents, civic leaders, and children in Bloomington to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Mboko Malambwe, do hereby proclaim May 21 through 27, 2023 as National Public Works Week. I urge all residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
This would have been a good picture for the finance director to take since they provide so much of the finances for public works. Oh, yes, yes, I'm sorry. Please, go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to accept this on behalf of all the hardworking public works team we have. There's a lot of people that you see on the street day to day, whether it's, picking up trash and recycle, or whether it's taking care of our streets and our signs and our traffic signals, our pavement markings, just a whole host of things that Public Works is involved with. So I just want to recognize all those hardworking people that we have on our team, and thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, the next proclamation is a proclamation recognizing May as Historic Preservation Month and honoring the members of the Historic Preservation Commission. I think all the members are coming up. Okay. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and sustainable development, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to provide the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas the theme for National Preservation Month 2023, People Saving Places, is a national high five to everyone doing the great work for saving lives in ways big and small, and inspiring others to do the same. And whereas the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission was created 40 years ago and has since been convened by dozens of committed and passionate volunteers. And I'm losing my whereases. Whereas the city of Bloomington has been a certified local government since 1985, okay, demonstrating a long-term commitment to working with state and federal partners to uphold national historic preservation standards. And whereas the city of the historic Bloomington Central Business District, constructed primarily between 1842 and 1942, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places for both historic and architectural significance. And whereas the city of Bloomington partners with organizations throughout the community to celebrate and implement a thriving downtown revitalization program in historic downtown, including First Fridays, the Downtown Farmers Market, Small Business Saturday, networking events, promotional events, and the Harriet Fuller Russ Facade Grant Program. And whereas the city of Bloomington is celebrating 18 years as a Main Street city with more than 130 locally owned and 2 active renovation projects. And whereas the city of Bloomington, through our code, our financial commitments, and our celebrations of place, supports historic preservation efforts throughout the year. Now, therefore, I, Mboka Malambwe, Mayor of Bloomington, Illinois, do proclaim May 2023 as his National Preservation Month, and do call upon the people of Bloomington to join other communities across the nation in recognizing and participating in this observance.
I want to shake his hand too. Thank you.
I'm Greg Coos, and I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. I'd like to thank the city for its long-term support, as this proclamation is so eloquently stated, for the principles of preserving the heart of our community. While you are engaged in that, things that you might not know, and this is just a very brief statement on this. Did you know that approximately 500 square blocks of the central part of your city were built before 1940? And that actually those areas, those compact old areas, provide a significant impact on your tax base and a huge impact on the tax base of District 87. So as we preserve our buildings, we're preserving our community tax base and providing homes for thousands of people. And the idea of historic preservation is not only to honor the past, but it's to keep a livable community with affordable housing, with good old, grand old houses. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, on to the next proclamation, which is EMS week. Why do I have so many today? All right. There's going to be a quiz afterwards, and we'll see who has been able to count how many whereases I have said. So, whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness and injury. And whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services provided by designated Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, I, Mboka Malambwe, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st through 27th, 2023 as Emergency Medical Services Week. I encourage the community to observe this week and the EMS Strong theme, where emergency care begins with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Thank you.
Just real brief, Mr. Mayor, council members, we had a plan to have a lot more people show up, but as Chief West alluded to last week, our call volume keeps going up. So we have a lot of people out there running calls tonight, doing excellent work. Very proud of what these people do every day in, day out. It's always a holiday that they're missing with their families or something goes wrong at home, they're at work, but they're always there with a smile on, proud to serve the city of Bloomington and do the best for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. Okay, the next and last proclamation is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Whereas every day, more than 120 Americans are killed by gun violence and more than 200 are shot and wounded, with an average of more than 17,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 26 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other high-income countries. And whereas Illinois has an average of 1,622 gun deaths every year, with a rate of 12.9 deaths per 100,000 people, a crisis that costs the state $18.6 billion each year. And whereas cities across the nation, including Bloomington, are working to end the senseless violence with evidence-based solution. And whereas support for our Second Amendment rights goes together with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. And whereas law enforcement officers, in partnership with local violence intervention activists and resources, know their communities best, are the most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are best positioned to understand how to keep the community safe. And whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton was tragically shot and killed at age 15. And on June 2nd, 2023, to recognize the 26th birthday of Hadia Pendleton, born June 2nd, 1997, people across the United States will recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day and wear orange in tribute to Hadia Pendleton and other victims of gun violence and the loved ones of those victims. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas by wearing orange on June 2nd, 2023, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. And now, therefore, I, Mboko Malambwe, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, recognize the first Friday in June 2nd, 2023, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. I encourage all residents to support the local communities to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a big Wear Orange event locally on June 3rd, Saturday at Western Avenue Community Center. And hopefully you will all be able to be aware of that and possibly attend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I do know already that we have one item to pull, right? 7M. Is there anything else that members of the council would like to pull? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda without 7M.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bullen.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Crumpler. The moment of truth.
And while votes are coming in, I will, and we've got them all in actually now. Councilmember Motney, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so do I need to say that there are no nays to announce? I mean, we can see it, right? Okay, awesome. Now we pull 7M. Is it because someone wants to speak to it, or we're just not gonna consider it this time?
Correct. It's just
Okay.
not being considered at this time.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we're gonna move on to the regular agenda. Item 8A, consideration and action on an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement by and between the City of Bloomington, Illinois and 402 Washington LLC as requested by the Economic and Community Development Department. And I'm gonna turn it over to Okay, to Deputy City Manager Tyus, who I believe is on the line, right?
I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Apologize for not being able to be here tonight. But I will have a brief presentation related to this proposed redevelopment agreement, and really more talking about what's being proposed. I know that you had several questions over the last several days regarding this project, and just kind of wanted to give you and the public an idea of sort of what's being proposed as it relates to this project, and hopefully answer some of the questions that may be out there. Excuse me. First of all, I thought it was worth it to have a brief conversation about what a TIF district is and how it works very generally. I know that you all understand that, but there may be some members of the public who are not familiar with TIF and how it works. It's a very specific tool that you use in order to try and encourage redevelopment in a particular area. So Phil, if you could go to the next slide, please. The property in question, as you can see on the screen, it's marked by the yellow star on the map. It's in what is known as the Downtown East Washington Street TIF District. It was established in 2018. With TIF districts, you by nature, they're areas that you define based on certain conditions. Things like conservation or blight or obsolescence or other problems that make those areas difficult to develop without some kind of assistance. So TIF by their nature are designed to help areas that are, for the most part, are difficult to develop. Excuse me. You'll also notice that this TIF versus others in other communities, or even here, frankly, was designed to be intentionally small because it was targeting very particular areas and parcels, very small areas. One of those areas was the former Bloomington High School, which has since been developed. And one of those parcels one of those areas are the parcels before you tonight. Again, very intentionally small because it was meant to be a very targeted TIF. With TIF, as I'll speak to here in a minute, one of the things that you're looking to do is to define this area that is already troubled. And as people invest in the area, the property values grow. And as those property values grow, a portion of those values are then reinvested into projects in order to continue the growth. And so one of those properties, as I said, was the Washington Street Washington Senior Apartments affordable housing property, which is marked by the asterisk just to the east of the property in question tonight. And again, I show this just to show that TIF works. This was a project that is affordable housing, which there have been some conversations about that tonight, was an affordable senior housing development that since the investment was made by the developer, the value of that property has grown by more than 4 times since this TIF was established in 2018. So again, I say that largely to show that with these types of agreements, they can and do spur development. Next slide, please, Phil. Thank you. Really quickly, just in terms of how TIF works, and again, I know you all understand this, but I think it's worth a conversation on this. When you establish a TIF district, you set a baseline value of what the taxable value is. That's that pre-tax revenue that you're generating. And so people continue to pay taxes. They pay both that non-growth revenue, but also what they're going to pay as taxes grow. So you set that baseline. As investment is made in projects, be that a project like what is before you tonight, or other projects, or infrastructure, or other things that happen in this defined district, you'll see incremental growth in the taxes. That increment is what can be used as incentive or other investment in the TIF to help to continue to grow the area. So, for example, with the project being proposed tonight, the incentive that is being proposed is only an incentive that is generated from the project itself. If in its growth in taxes that would not happen and is not happening were it not for this actual project. And so if there is no growth, they do not receive any incentive. The thing about a TIF district in this situation is that once the TIF expires, that post-TIF tax revenue then is available for all to go to the entirety of the community. It's meant to be a tool, as I said, to spur reinvestment in a particular area. So hopefully that makes sense. Next slide, please. In terms of this project, I know we've talked a lot about it, but what is it exactly? This project, if approved, would bring about, as you can read, 72 1- and 2-bedroom market rate apartments and townhomes. It would have the townhomes, but also a five-level mid-rise apartment building, parking, green space, et cetera, et cetera. The developer's proposed investment is $18.5 million. And again, as I said earlier, the incentive that would be provided, if approved, would only come as a result of this investment happening and you seeing growth in the value of the property. And we've been told in our analysis and the private consultant that we utilize to do analysis indicates that this project would not be financially feasible without some level of city incentive and the level of city incentive that is being proposed. So that's the project. Now, I will say that the renderings on screen are simply renderings that we had done to show what can be. They are not the actual proposed design. Those are yet to come. Next slide, please. In terms of the terms, this agreement would utilize 75% of that increment that is generated, plus the short-term rental tax rebate, to reimburse the developer for eligible TIF eligible project costs. Now, what that means is that you can't simply use these funds to pay for anything. There are certain costs that are TIF eligible, things like property acquisition and planning and cost to rehab and redevelop a site, et cetera, et cetera. A portion of that increment, as I said, would be utilized to provide that reimbursement. 25% of the increment generated would be placed in a fund for other uses. One of the things that you often hear is that school districts, if you can help it, you don't want to negatively impact school district with TIF districts. Well, state statute allows for a portion of those funds, if they're generated, to be utilized to help school districts in the event that those school districts are impacted by the development. And what I mean by that is that in the event that there are school-aged children, new school-aged children, who will be living in this incentivized development, then the school district can receive a level of reimbursement to help with those costs. So those are the structured terms of the actual proposed agreement. Next slide, please. And finally, I really just have a series of questions or items or issues that have sort of been raised over the last several days that I wanted to try and address. I know that there have been some on council and also in the public who have talked about the fact that there's not currently a site plan. Wanted to let you know that that's common and that there are still 2 levels of review that remain if this agreement is approved. There is a historical review because of the age of the church that is impacted here. And there's also an actual site plan review. The developer will have to submit a site plan for plan commission review that will ultimately also come back to you for consideration and potential approval. So those things still have to happen. And your consideration of that plan will be based on zoning ordinance and code standards that have been approved by this and previous council. So still some review to come as it relates to the actual project. There's been several comments tonight about luxury and this being a luxury project. I have talked to the developer and they have stated that probably was the wrong term to utilize as part of this, the description of this project. It is a market rate project with the rents as stated tonight to be driven by market rate. Again, understanding that in a community like Bloomington, market rate can vary and it can be higher, frankly, than people might think. But again, this project is not a luxury project. It will have higher end finishes, but it's not a luxury project. And I think that's worth mentioning. The market would drive the rates for housing here. I think it's worth mentioning that both of these properties are currently tax exempt, one owned by the city and one owned by the church and not currently generating any level of revenue or tax revenue. They have also been determined to be dilapidated based on the TIF study we did to create the actual TIF district. The City of Refuge, which is the church that has an agreement with as part of this, is supportive of this development. I think it's worth mentioning that this church is also not historically designated. There have been some questions about whether or not there is a historical designation to the church. The church is supportive of this agreement and feels as though it's good for the area. It also allows them to better serve their congregation in that their current property has fallen into disrepair and, as I said, is dilapidated. There have been some questions about whether there is any possibility to honor the historic character and nature of the downtown and the area. One other thing I think is worth mentioning is that the zoning for this property is D2, which is actually a transition zoning to go from the character of our downtown to some of the less intense designs of our residential district. And there are designs as part of that zoning that allow for that transition. And what I mean by that is some of the designs allow for how you design the building need to be closer to the sidewalk, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the designs of the glass and the buildings have to be in a certain way so that, I don't want to say that they have to be completely historic in nature, but there are elements in place that are allowing for a transition from the downtown to some of the less intense residential districts. And finally, excuse me, there's been conversation tonight and otherwise about affordable housing and about this housing development and what it represents. It's worth saying that this project is one piece of a larger housing puzzle. And that I do think it's mentioning that we want to see all types of housing, as there's a shortage of all types in our community. Just because you do one doesn't mean you can't do others. It's not an either or situation. And I think that's worth mentioning. And I think it's worth mentioning that we are working to do all types of housing in this community. There is this market rate project, but as I discussed earlier, right down the block, there is an affordable senior housing unit with 52 units that the city council approved several years ago to provide affordable housing right down the block from there. We believe that increased housing stock will alleviate some of the housing prices that we're seeing. The city of Bloomington regularly partners with Habitat for Humanity each and every year through our CDBG program to provide affordable housing. We regularly provide letters of support for developers using low income tax credits to provide affordable housing, such as the Lincoln Lofts project. We incentivized, as I said, redevelopment of the Washington High School project development. And while, to be clear, I don't say this to say that there is enough affordable housing, because there is not. But there are currently 19 affordable housing properties in development, many of which we worked on to facilitate. That does not include some of the Habitat homes that I mentioned, or some of the housing choice vouchers as well. So I only say all of that to say that affordable housing is important to us as well. And it's part of this overall housing puzzle that we're all working desperately to solve. As someone mentioned earlier, the EDC did mention that there's 4,000 plus shortage. There's a shortage of 4,000 plus units in our community. And that, again, as I said, is across a number of different housing types. And we believe we can do them all. So with that, I will pause and see if there are any comments or questions or anything that we can try and answer.
Okay, I am checking out my iPad here if there are any comments, questions. Okay. So we have Councilmember Crumpler and Becker. And just as a reminder, it looks like we have 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask everyone to be mindful of time. Maybe you ask one question and then give everybody else a chance to ask, and then we can go for another go round. So let's start with Councilmember Crumpler.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be brief. I actually have 2 points I appreciate Mr. Kaufman and his partners' desire to move this project forward in a timely fashion. Indeed, beginning and completing a project like this one in agreed upon time frame is key. And hiring the right qualified people to do the work will inform that goal. And I really want to support this project. However, I believe prevailing wages will allow for hiring the right individuals and help our families attain a decent living and reinvest in this community. And we should find a way to write that language into the contract that would be agreeable to all parties. My second point is the federal apprenticeship programs are already in place within our local unions, help build skills and encourage community investment. And they should be a part of this contract as well. And I hope the developers can see the value of working with the unions to include this in our agreement. Having said that, I would like to make a motion to table this until the June 12th meeting so that we can have more opportunity to talk through some of these issues that I've raised tonight.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and do you want to, so Councilmember Becker?
Just to be honest, I'm against the motion to table. I've talked to a lot of businesses in town, and this is, as Deputy City Manager Tyus stated, this is a piece of a larger puzzle. This is a need that we do need to follow through on. The businesses in this community that are trying to recruit resources to allow them to stay here and staff their businesses need this kind of housing. It's a good project from longtime Bloomington people that are investing in their town in a good, positive way. I am very confident that it will benefit all sorts of local workers and citizens. I would support this as it is, and I would support it tonight if given the opportunity.
All right, it's so much easier to look at the lights.
Yeah, it looks like you just have
Just-
Councilmember Hendricks left.
Hendricks,
Yeah.
okay, it just froze, so I can't see anything. Okay, Councilmember Hendricks.
I just wanted to speak to why I seconded that motion. There have been many conversations that have been taking place related to this project and weighing all of the different concerns related to affordable housing, which I do think is something that the city is looking at on all fronts. But I do think that there does need to be more of a focus on local labor. There has been discussions of PLAs, there have been discussions of prevailing wage. And while I know we heard that some of these delays might cause issues, I think that it's in our best responsibility as a city to make sure that we are supporting our local labor as much as we possibly can, and making sure that as we use, which I know that the funds for this development come as a result of the development, but it is still a TIF designated by the city and managed by the city to carry out that work. And so that's why I think that we should table this to the next meeting so that we can have more of those conversations.
To vote now.
Well, I'm still fiddling around with this thing. Hey, it says I joined the meeting successfully.
You can jump
Okay.
to lights if you want to just
Yeah,
go to
right.
lights. That's totally
Anybody
fine.
else
Yeah.
would like?
I-
Councilmember Crumple, you have your light on. Did you want to speak? Okay, all right. Councilmember Bullen?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. This is a public-private project. It is not city-driven. The developers are investing $18 million to develop a property that is generating zero tax revenue. If the EAV does not increase over the next 23 years, the developers will receive no money. That is how the TIF works. Now, as far as having the labor issue, I think it's valid, and I do believe that the developers would be open to that kind of discussion. I'm in favor of moving forward on this. I don't see tabling to change anything. So I'm not asking the developers to speak, but this is just my thought that possibly further discussion could happen on that topic or any other topic. And as far as affordable housing, there is a very large project going on called Lincoln Lofts between Lincoln and Oakland. It's on a major bus route and walking distance to Kroger. So there is a lot of affordable housing. Danbury Court, also in Ward 2, my ward, has federally subsidized affordable housing right aside market value housing. So that argument in my mind is doesn't really hold a lot of weight.
Yeah, any others? Okay, I don't see any other lights, so, oh, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, if I could just maybe kind of respond to that comment that it just seems like there's a huge disparity of what is going to be considered market, which we're gonna stop using the word luxury, right? Because it sounds bad. But if it's higher end amenities, and then when we look at what's happening at Lincoln Lofts, corners are being cut, the units that are done now, the elevator is always broken. There's always things going on there. And so if that's our definition of affordable housing, then that's really troublesome and burdensome and something that, you know, it's hard to approve a project that was deemed a luxury, but now we're backing off of that phrase. And then comparing projects that are to me not even considered decent. If people that live there are stuck in their homes because they're wheelchair bound or have mobility issues, you know, that to me, that's not decent, affordable housing. And it shouldn't only be allowed for people who can afford luxury or quote market rate at this point. So I don't think that those two things should be compared. We need to have more affordable housing. So it's hard to say yes to a project like this for sure. But I do see the, you know, there's pros and cons to it. I guess I'll just leave it there.
Okay, sounds good. I'm not seeing anyone else, but I wanted to be sure that Councilmember Montney had a chance to respond. Oh, okay. Well, let's go to Councilmember Montney first, since that was my first thought, and then after that, we'll go to Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I just appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the great explanation by Deputy City Manager Tyus and the comments by my colleagues. I don't support tabling this because of the time sensitivity of the cost of funds for the investor. I feel we should move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee. You have
So
22 seconds.
So there's a lot of good things
Speak
being
fast.
said. I think one.
Could you speak a little closer to the microphones? Sorry.
Yes, so a lot of good things being said. I want to reiterate what Councilmember Donna said, that this is a private venture. They are investing quite a bit into our community. And honestly, I don't know what we're going to gain by tabling this. So I vote to move forward with it.
Sounds good. Yes, we do have to vote on the motion to table. Yes, motion to table.
And Councilmember Montney, how would you like to vote?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, so that leaves me, right? Okay, then let's do yes. So let's table.
Table?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 8B, right? Okay. A presentation and discussion of fiscal year FY 24-25, general resurfacing and pavement preservation program, and the state of the street and sidewalk network. And I'm going to turn it over to Deputy City Manager Jurgens.
Sounds a little weird, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're proud to bring forward our presentation of the FY 24 and 25 general resurfacing and pavement preservation programs. As you may remember, we've combined a couple of fiscal years as we're trying to look ahead and do a little bit more planning. Going to turn this over to Kevin Cothey, our Public Works Director, and Craig Schonkweiler, Assistant Director and City Engineer. They put a lot of work into this project and a lot of exciting things to talk about. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Jurgens, and Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. I want to recognize all the great work that Craig Schonkweiler and his team have done, compiling a lot of good information for you tonight. And just want to recognize all the hard work that he's done with this presentation. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Craig Schonkweiler.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Deputy City Managers, and City Council members. Next slide, please. So when we look at our network in total, we have 322 centerline miles. A centerline mile is down the center of the street. You can see an example in the upper right. That's converted to 842 lane miles. A lane mile is one lane. Up on the example on the right, you see 4 lanes. That would mean 4 lane miles in a 1 mile length. So from this point forward in the presentation, we'll be referring to lane miles when you see stats. The sidewalk network, we have 458 parcel miles. When we assess our sidewalk network, we use parcels, which is like property parcels. You see an example there. So we look at the totality along the parcel instead of individual panels. And the other example there is a corner with 2 ramps. So in total, we have 8,546 ramps throughout the city. Next slide, please. These charts represent what we have. In the upper left, it's we break our pavement or street system down into what's called functional classification. Functional classification is a classification of a street based on the characteristic of service. So when we look on the upper left there, we have minor arterials. Those streets have the ability to quickly move relatively large volumes of traffic with restricted access to adjacent properties. They typically have higher speeds than, say, collectors and local streets. An example of a minor arterial is Washington Street. A collector has relative even distribution of access and mobility. Traffic volumes and speeds are typically lower than those of arterials. An example there would be Colton Avenue. Locals, they provide direct access to adjacent properties and the speeds are the lowest in the system. An example there would be Jefferson and Monroe. So you can see that over 68% of our system is local streets, with the remainder being the minor arterials and collectors. When we look up to the right there at the chart, we see the types of pavement that we deal with. The vast majority is hot mix asphalt streets. Then in orange there is concrete streets with a small amount of brick and surface treated, which are like chip seal you'll see in a rural area, and a very small fraction of gravel streets. On the bottom right table there basically breaks it down by surface type and functional class. So in general, our minor arterials and collectors are made up of asphalt and concrete streets, with all of our brick and surface treated and gravel streets being our local streets. Next slide, please. When we look at the condition of pavements, we use what's called a PASER rating system. PASER stands for Pavement Surface Evaluation Rating System. It's produced by the Wisconsin Transportation and Information Center with support from the Federal Highway Administration. It uses a visual inspection to evaluate pavement surface conditions. When you see the remaining slides, you'll see numbers in there, and that's what this chart basically indicates, from 10 being excellent to new, all the way down to a 1 range. Same thing with the color band. You'll see that green is generally good, along with yellow, and then we moved into the orange to red, which is not so good. Next slide, please. These pictures of our representative samples of asphalt streets within our community. When you look at upper left, number 9, generally that's a new overlay in really good shape. And then we go all the way down to number 3. That's where they're poor condition with a lot of potholes, a lot of cracking throughout the streets. And then in the middle is the different ranges when we look at the condition of streets. Next slide, please. So how do we obtain the PASER rating? Currently, we do windshield surveys with our technicians. We do this annually, although due to staffing issues, we have not kept to pace with that. It is a bit subjective. We're looking at moving to automated in the future here. On the right is an example of what we're looking at, which is a camera mounted system using cell phones that would give us some high resolution images and evaluate using algorithms and determine that PASER rating. That would give us apples to apples throughout the system. We've noticed, and it's no fault to anybody, but we get different viewpoints on what that windshield survey is and different times a year and things like that when it's done. We feel that moving to future automated systems is probably the best procedure going forward. Right now, we're looking into a pilot program with a company called Tiger Eye that matches up with what you'll see later, the software program that we use to develop our program. And they're looking at about a $70,000 commitment. Now, that may sound like a lot, but I can tell you with using high resolution vans, something could be had in the neighborhood of $400,000 or $500,000. So this modified version is a lot more cost effective than what it had been there several years ago. Next slide, please. So this is a table with a lot of colors, but it basically shows what we know today, given the windshield surveys that we've done. What's important to note here is that about 40% of our network is in the fair to poor range, generally speaking. When we look at the sidewalk system, it's in a little bit better shape than the roadway system. There it's about 18 to 20% in the fair to poor range. overall, the street network is about a 6.3. And when we look at the far left there, we're at just the bottom end of good. Sidewalk network, as I indicated, is a little bit better, closer to the top end of the good, what we call good minus. Next slide, please. This is a GIS view of our system. It comes straight out of the software program that I'll talk about later. What you can see here generally is that green is good, yellow is good, orange not so good, and then red not good at all. So you can see that in time, we keep track of these ratings, and there are some pockets of areas where there's significantly poor pavements. We have been generally making headway in the central to western part of the city. But as the city ages, you're going to be seeing more and more red on the eastern part of the city. Next slide, please. So what I've got here is a snapshots of different sidewalk levels throughout the city, with green again being good, red not so good. We do have a fair amount of upper right barrier curbs, which provide an obstacle to particularly the disabled. Likewise, the old and broken sidewalks on the bottom right. The bottom middle, the utility service, unfortunately, that happens from time to time where the utility service was installed, but the sidewalk then was compromised or sagged as a result of that utility service. Next slide, please. These are further examples of steep ramps on the left, tree heaves. We have a fair amount of tree heaves throughout the city. We have some spalled concrete, that's a material issue. And then settled panels, mainly those occur in the newer parts of the city. Next slide, please. So what we got here is a pavement deterioration curve. What causes pavement deterioration? There are primarily 6 causations. Traffic loading is one of them. Environmental or climate influences, material quality issues, construction deficiencies, drainage deficiencies, and utility cuts. Basically, what you're seeing here in the blue line is that when a pavement is newly built at year 0, it's a 10. But through time, as we move along that x-axis to the right, the pavement begins to deteriorate. Hence those pictures that you previously saw. So if we don't do anything to the pavement, likely by the time we're at 20 to 30 years, we're in a really poor condition. What you see here with the language in the middle, we use different types of treatments. We use a rejuvenator, which I'll talk about later. That's a lower cost. As you move along that curve to the right, we'll talk about a slurry seal product that we're looking at doing here in Bloomington for the first time. And then we have our stone matrix asphalt and hot mix asphalt resurfacing. You can see the price increases per square yard as you move along. And then ultimately we get to reconstruction if we don't do anything, and that's quite costly. The primary philosophy that we try to manage our pavements is to keep the good roads good. Back in the day when I first started, it was a worst first philosophy. So that meant whatever the worst roads were, that's the ones you went to. What's been found through time is that it's very difficult to get yourself out of a hole by doing worst first solely. So there's different strategies that we'll talk about later, but just keep that in mind as we move through the presentation. Next slide, please. So this graph is our historic resurfacing cost and lane miles over the period from 1995 to 2022. The blue bars show the amount of resurfacing in those years, dollars, or the dollar years through time. What's important to note is there was a period of time there in the nineties to about, say, 2005, 6, 7, where, there was a low amount spent. And there's various reasons for why that was done at that time. But all of those pavements that were resurfaced end up becoming due, or they were not fully addressed. So that we should keep that in mind as we move along to the right side of the chart. You can see in 2014, there was a large bar there. That was a bond year that the council had supported. Of note too, in 2015, council adopted a sidewalk master plan. When we go to the red line as it zigs and zags along the screen, those are the lane miles that we talked about earlier. The lane miles you can see on the left part of the screen, we got more bang for the buck. The cost per ton of asphalt, and we pay for things in the unit prices, was significantly less than what we pay today. As you move along to the right side of the graph, basically you begin to see that, or one, putting more into the sidewalks, which we're required to through the American Disabilities Act. And it's the right thing to do, but it also keeps us from being able to address the pavements fully. So we should just keep that in mind as we move through this. Next slide, please. This is the sidewalk program historical expenses over the last 20 years. Again, there was a period of time there for about a decade where there wasn't really much spent. Then council voted to increase the amount of funding, and you can see in 2015 there was significantly more money invested in the system through that 10-year period of time. When we look back at the network number that we had at 6.7, I went back to where the master plan number was at 2015. We were at a 6.1. So we went from a 6.1 in 2015 to currently a 6.7 during that period of time. Next slide, please. This graph gives you an illustration of the cost per foot that we pay. These are bidded numbers, so it's what the market gives us. And you can see that it's more than doubled per square foot through time. Next slide, please. This is an image of the decision optimization technology that we use to develop our plans. DOT, as we call it, is an asset and investment planning software. It uses multi-year, multi-constraint optimization algorithms to best identify methods to manage our payments and provide solutions to our capital planning needs. We've been using this now for what, Kevin, 3 or 4 years? About 3 or 4 years now. And it's proven to be quite handy. What you see on the screen there are different representative snapshots that we use to develop our plans, throughout the system. Next slide, please. This chart here is our FY24 program allocations. Council had passed a budget of 10 million. We had about 100,000 of rollover from FY23. We had reserved some for pilot programs that we were looking to investigate, but as we moved through our research, we ended up determining that the pilot programs could be scrapped and go full bore into particularly this high pressure slurry seal, which I'll talk about in a little while. What's important about this chart is that about 85% of our program is going to be put towards resurfacing and sidewalks, with about 12.5 being allocated to pavement preservation, with about almost 10% of that being this high pressure slurry that I'll talk about. And then we reserve a really relatively small amount of $250,000 for emergency repairs. We do that because payments aren't always predictable, and there's times when we have to immediately address issues. So that's why we set aside that amount of money. Next slide, please. So this is a chart showing the lane miles and the different categories. So you can see that this year we're anticipating to resurface about 13.3 lane miles of resurfacing. Pavement preservation, we've ramped that up. In the past, we've done quite a bit of rejuvenator. Now we're looking at this high pressure slurry. We're looking at about 7 lane miles of that product. And then some chip seal. We have some outer boundary roads that haven't been chip sealed in several years. We want to address those so that we don't end up getting into a state of reconstruction at a later time. So that would give us about 25 lane miles of pavement preservation and with a total program of about 38.3 lane miles. Next slide, please. This is our FY25 program allocations. Keep in mind that when we look at the second year, we're doing it with the information we have at the current time. When we develop or obtain more ratings, some of the streets that we anticipate may shift slightly here and there. But at this point, we're looking at about 80% of our program to go to resurfacing and sidewalks compared to 85% in FY24. That's part of that shift of trying to keep the good roads good and not let them slide down that curve. 17% would go to pavement preservation. So we're going to ramp up that use of that slurry seal product, which we'll talk about. And then again, we've reserved some for emergency repairs. Now, we've also reserved two critical components here. One is concrete subdivision streets, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then another $1 million for inflation, advanced deterioration unknowns. That allows us to be able to, in essence, call an audible a year from now, should a street come forward that we really need to address. So otherwise, if we go ahead and allocate everything now, we don't know how the winter's going to hold up. We don't know what the loading is going to really show on the pavement deterioration. So we want to reserve at least $1 million of that program. Next slide, please. So this is an example of our street program treatments. I don't have chip seal up here. That's fairly basic. Put down oil, put down limestone rock. But up top there, we have a rejuvenator called Reclamite. You all may have seen that throughout the city. The city's been using it since 2011. The rejuvenator, we usually do 2 applications. One application will extend the life of the pavement by 5 to 7 years. So we've been doing that for over a decade plus. We'll do 2 to 3 applications in 5-year intervals. And it penetrates, rejuvenates, and seals, and it also prevents the raveling and stripping of the pavement surface. In the middle here, this is that high pressure slurry that I'm talking about throughout the presentation. This is a new product to the Illinois area. The company that we're looking at using is out of Missouri. They basically design a chemically designed mix for our climate. Springfield used it last year. Washington used it last year. Danville and Champaign are looking to use it this year. It gives a plus 10-year average surface life. On the screen there, you can see a before pavement with cracking and then the after. It gives that look and feel of resurfacing at really a fraction of the cost. What it does is it injects this pressure crack sealant into the pavement while simultaneously applying a thin asphalt overlay. It can usually be driven on within 30 minutes. So this is the first use of that product. We're looking to use that up in the Eagle Ridge subdivision this year. And then resurfacing is the bottom left. That's been our traditional methodology on hot mix asphalt. And what we do there is typically cold plane or mill off the surface, and we'll put back 1 or 2 layers depending upon the condition of the pavement. Hot mix asphalt, typical life is, say, on average, untreated 12 to 15 years. We also use a product called SMA, which is stone matrix asphalt, which can give you +5 to 8 years more life. We'll do that type of premium mix on our arterials and collectors, but not on our local streets. For comparison purposes, in the Eagle Ridge subdivision, we're looking at about 600,000 to be used in that subdivision. If we resurface that subdivision, we'd be looking at almost 4 times the amount, so about 2.3 million. Now, to be fair, I presume the question will be, well, why not use this everywhere? Well, the pavement has to be in better shape than what we really have. We'll have to go in and spot repair areas ahead of use of this product. But again, it's capturing it as the pavement's sliding down that deterioration curve and resetting it, instead of letting it continue to go to the point that it has to be fully resurfaced or reconstructed. Next slide, please. This is an example of a corner treatment. And what's important about this is we've all seen ramps on the corners, but there's a lot of work that goes on to just putting in a ramp in. When we do a ramp, we do the curb and gutter at the corner. We adjust the inlets. Sometimes we'll remove the inlet and adjust it, and then we'll find that the pipes need to be reworked. We drop the grade down on the ramp to meet ADA, and then sometimes we have to put a yard curb in the back. What you see right there on that screen, that's about $7,300 worth of work. Just to give you a relative number. And then think about, we usually do that 4 corners of an intersection. Next slide, please. So this map here is our recommended program for FY24 and 25. In blue is the streets we intend to resurface. Those all of those streets that were shown to you folks last year are the same streets. We just added a few more. Some of the highlights we're going to resurface Towanda up by Country Financial. We're going to do Washington Street by Washington Elementary School as you turn the corner on Towanda and head towards downtown. And one thing to note there is I've been heavily involved in the downtown project. And one thing we learned through cell phone data was that the highest amount of traffic volume in and out of downtown comes through Washington Street, believe it or not. We thought maybe it was on 51. It's not. It's actually on Washington Street. And likewise, Oakland, down by Oakland School, that pavement is not in really good shape at all. It's breaking down. We're gonna have to go in and do severe patching there. In orange, that's next year's resurfacing. Highlight is the Meadowbrook subdivision that will be let out with a water main project, and then some repair of the ramps. This project here, what you see in orange, would come back after they're all finished and then reset the surface. And then in red is our pavement preservation program throughout the city. Up there in the upper right, that's the Eagle Ridge subdivision. And then we have various treatments that we would be using throughout the city there. And then in black is the next year's pavement preservation. And then the highlight there is the slurry would be down in the Fox Creek subdivision. There's a lot of very long roads within that subdivision that we need to catch now before they get too bad. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides are examples of some of the concerning items that we've discovered through our condition rating. This first slide is the Old Farm Lake subdivision. These are representative pictures that have letters on the right and then on the left on the map that give you an indication of the condition of the street. This one on the next side, this is where we're reserving the $1 million. We're going to develop a plan of attack for these streets. The 1 million will not cut it completely, but it will give us a start. What you're seeing here was built in the late 80s, early 90s. Typically that's 6 inches of concrete directly on dirt. In the future, we'll come forth with some recommendations to change the pavements for our developments where they're built with a better base and maybe a little thicker, so they'll last longer. The pavement deterioration that you're seeing here is a combination of weak pavements and material issues, particularly like the upper right corner. Whenever you see that kind of cracking, that curves like that, that's an indication of material issues. When you see things like small cracked areas, those are more indicative of weak pavements. Next slide, please. Also within the Golden Eagle and Golden Eagle South subdivisions, you see some select areas there that are really in poor shape. They're just not, we've got to address it. These will indicate just what I'm seeing here is remove and replace. So we'll probably have to spend money to take it out and put it back. In other areas that we can salvage the pavement, we'll may go in and do spot repairs and then overlay it with asphalt. Next slide, please. And I guess I'll hold a second on Golden Eagle. That was built in the late 90s. So we're looking at about a 25 to 26 year life. We want to at least get 40 to 50 plus. So we're not getting the lifespan that we should be getting from a concrete pavement. Back to the Old Farm Lakes, that's about 29 to 36 years old. So we're getting a better life. It's just that people are having to drive on rough pavement. So what's the schedule? We think again, it would be wise to go with 2 phases for our general resurfacing and sidewalk projects. We did that in FY23 and it really worked out well. Phase 1 was a lead out with SMA. We've only got 1 producer within our region that produces that product. We broke out a smaller hot mix asphalt contract to see if we could get other bidders, and we did. We got some folks to come in that hadn't bid in quite a while. So that was successful. So we think we'll take that same approach again. And I would say this year with phase 1, instead of seeking a bid waiver, we're going to put it back out to the market and see what the market gives us to test. And then if in turn we just have that 1 supplier, then we'll probably come back for a bid waiver in the future. The pavement preservation projects would be slated to come forth here this summer. Matter of fact, you'll probably see a bid waiver on the high pressure slurry coming here, maybe even next council meeting, and then the chip seal will go out to bid here. I'm hoping this week, and then the rejuvenator, we usually do a bid waiver on that, or well, it's a single source supplier on that here later this summer. Next slide, please. So our recommendations moving forward is to basically get a good handle on what we have and switch to an automated collection system. Within that DOT software that I mentioned, there's a learning feature where the software can learn through points in time of the pavement condition and then map that curve to each individual street. We're not fully utilizing that feature right now because we don't have enough data points, but we get the automated collection information. We think that that'll help. What that'll tell us then is right now there's sort of standard curves, but through time, we think particularly with the SMA mixes that we'll get a better curve than what we're seeing within the software right now. We also are recommending to expand our pavement preservation methods, hence the slurry. Continue to use the reclamite. You're starting to see some of the other methods of full depth concrete pavement patching, particularly over on Hershey this year. And we're doing more of that to, again, try to keep the good roads good. And then number 4 here, develop a plan, a rehab plan for Old Farm Lakes. Again, and Golden Eagle subdivision, we've reserved some money, but we need to really assess it, come up with a plan, and then come back to you folks with a phased approach. And then continually assess the budgetary needs going forward. One of the things that's important to note is inflationary concerns. When we look, I've done an assessment of with the Bureau of Labor cost, and we're seeing 7% increase just across the board. But when we go to our streets with asphalt, we're seeing more like 15% cost increases. So if we take that 10 million, and we account for inflation, then next year we buy less. It's just a fact. So we should keep that in mind as we move forward with our budgetary needs. We haven't seen costs coming down yet. We're hopeful. Probably the biggest indicator for that I watch is gas prices, because fuel comes into play in all of our work. And of course, the asphalt is a byproduct of petroleum. So I watch for that. Watch obviously any of the bids that we have out, and see what material costs come in. There's a lot of work out there that drives prices up too. So we should always keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So you can always visit our one-stop shop here, bloomingtonstreets.com. For more information, we'll post this presentation, and we'll open it up, Kevin and I, to questions.
Okay, it's working. Councilmember Becker and Councilmember Crumpler.
So I just want to say thank you. You've done a great job on many presentations, but I think that was the most educational and the most information you've ever been able to give us. It was a fabulous job. So thank you very much. I think it really demonstrates one thing, and this, I'm going to state it as a statement, but I want you to confirm it. That's really the question. And I think you alluded to it. When you look at this, you saw the budget going up quite a bit over time, but the lane miles not going up that much. All the push that we as a council, the past council, have made to put more money in the budget isn't enough if we're going to make progress, even with the better plan and better product that you've proposed. Is that an accurate statement?
That is an accurate statement. Yes.
So the only way that we can meet the needs that you have for funding is probably drive up the tax base and create more revenue in that way so that we have more budget from an expanded tax base rather than raising the taxes on the individual, which means we need to focus on development. So hint, hint on the last issue that we could have passed tonight. Thanks, guys. Great job.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Craig and Kevin, thanks so much. Agreeing with my colleague, Councilmember Becker, this is a great detailed presentation. I love all the graphs and charts, because I think it really helped me visualize, the amount of work the city is doing. Just one quick question. You talked about the increased amount you're investing in pavement preservation, rejuvenating the slurry. And I know there are a lot of variables that come into play here for each street, but could you just maybe talk a little bit about how much does the rejuvenation extend the life of a street so that you wouldn't necessarily have to do general resurfacing?
So if we took a typical resurfaced street, like I was saying, about 12 to 15 years with untreated, we add the rejuvenator to it, it'll extend the life 5 to 7 years, one application. So we will usually do 2 to 3. So we try to get that out to about 20 years.
It's going to make a huge difference. And you talked about, the 10% inflation. Hopefully that comes down in the next few years, and that rejuvenation work really begins to pay off a bit for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. More problem with this thing? Anybody else? No? Okay. It looks like you are off the hook, so thank you. Nice job. I definitely appreciate the historical graphs, to see how much was spent every year. So it gives us a good measure of what we've been doing over the years compared to, the earlier years where we spent a lot less. So thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and I should mention that Councilmember Montney had logged off, so. Yep, okay, all right. So next item on the agenda is the Finance Director's report, and we have Mr. Rathbun to provide that.
Thank you, Mayor. Under there, just from a budgetary standpoint. All right, I'll see. So just to continue on with the funding sources for asphalt and concrete fund, streets and sidewalks. We generate approximately, it's a little under $3 million. It's 10% of our home rule sales tax goes towards the asphalt and concrete fund. It's restricted. And then about $4 million from the local motor fuel tax. So together, the restricted dollars are about $7 million. So in 24, we're using 2 million of ARPA funds for the additional 3, and then subsidizing another $1 million from the general fund. And then in the out years, the future years, as part of the budget, we produce 5 years of budgetary information, even though only the next year is appropriated by ordinance. We have built in $3 million of subsidies from the general fund, just coming from general tax revenues to support that $10 million target. So that's the base, in discussing the future and where those funding sources come from. So tonight, for the monthly report, the fiscal year is complete, but as I mentioned last month, we still have 2 more months of sales taxes to be recognized. There's actually a 3-month delay in sales tax revenues that we receive from the state, but our revenue recognition we only backdate 2 months. Tonight, I'm gonna go through some of the formatting. Several new council members. I'm sure you're pretty well educated on this, but I'm gonna comment on what we do every month and some kind of the background information. But we'll be covering year end for fiscal 23 for the next 2 meetings, and then we'll start in the fiscal 24 in August. So next slide, please. So the major tax revenues. Now, the general fund, and I'll get to that in a moment, is mainly supported by general tax revenues. Not all of these revenues that we highlight every month go to the general fund. You can see local motor fuel tax on here, which goes straight to the asphalt and concrete fund. But these are the revenues of the city that are economically driven. So good economy, we do well here. Poor economy, this is going to suffer. It's not like the enterprise funds where those are fee-based revenues that support those funds, like water, sewer, storm, consumption-based. Those are very regular, dependable revenue sources. So all of our revenues, I think the only one that's doing a little under and that we just missed on the budget there is franchise tax, but all of our revenues are doing really, really well this year. I've mentioned this every month. It's a double-edged sword. What inflation does for local governments that are fortunate enough to have strong economies like we do here in Bloomington, where the consumption is sustained at the same level it was prior to inflation. We're seeing those elevated tax revenues coming into the city. And of course, that is kind of the opposite for the residents of the city. They're kind of enduring that pain. But for us, it is manifesting itself in very positive revenue. So with this exhibit, we show the annual budget in the first column, and then we do a year-to-date months collected. So you can see as of the end of April, we had 10 months of sales tax. And then the rest of these are what we refer to as, most of them are local taxes that we collect here locally. Those are due from retailers by the 20th of the following month. So for April, we'll be receiving those tax returns on the 20th of May. We have received those. And so compiling those, so we have one more month of the local taxes and 2 more months of the home rule to recognize. The year-to-date budget column. So we budget most of these major tax revenues utilizing 15 to 20 years of historical data. And so we budget for the year on the monthly basis. So we kind of build seasonality in our worksheets. So the year-to-date budget is not just going to be a straight line calculation. So like if we're 10 months in on state sales tax, you don't take 16,500,000 divided by 10 or divided by 12 and then multiply times 10 to get the year-to-date budget. We provide or produce that from a worksheet because there are certain months that have higher sales tax activities related to the holidays, et cetera. So we build that year-to-date budget manually using history. And then the year-to-date actual is just the actual, and then the variance is just the variance and the percent. And then we do the comparisons to prior year. And then we're showing the budgetary change to kind of give some reference because we have some pretty big deviations. When we were coming out of COVID, we took down some revenues. So when we saw an upward trend, it looked like we were really materially different than the prior year's budget, but it was from a budgetary standpoint. But as of year to date, you can barely see it on the screen here. We're $12 million positive variance, and you'll see that in the next exhibit. So next slide, please. The general fund. So the city's financial structure, talked about this. We have 29 funds. So all these funds are really almost like business units of a large corporation. The general fund is the largest business unit. It's primarily funded, as I mentioned previously, by taxes. Now, there are significant charges for services as well related to parks and fire, ambulance fees, et cetera, but you can see that the budget for the year was around 92 million of $123 million budget. So highlighting just a couple of lines, and then again, we'll be covering the year end, the next 2 months, and kind of locking this down and going through this exhibit again and again to hone in on that projected year end column. That's what we're really driving at in the last few months. But just to kind of highlight the structure of the exhibit, the budget, the year-to-date actual, and then the percent is just a straight up percent. We have at the top of that column, annualized trend is 100%. So we're 12 months in of a 12-month year right now. This is not a real usable statistics. So the prior month was 11/12. I don't remember the exact factor, but it's just a point of reference for whoever's looking at our financials. You know, some of those things are very straight line, some of them are not. And then when we get into about 3 months prior to year, and we kind of consolidate this exhibit and start showing the adjustment to the budget for our projection to try to get it a projected year in by line item. So, and I failed to mention this income statement. We're reviewing an income statement here. Revenues first is by what we refer to as just categories. And those are summary categories. You can see taxes, licenses, permits. So we have hundreds of accounts a lot of times in some of these categories, not necessarily with revenues, but on the expenditure side. And so this consolidates into a summary format. So taxes we're predicting right now to be $14.6 million positive variance. We just showed that we were $12 million on the previous exhibit. So, you know, another $2 million to be recognized, a positive variance. So ended up $107 million. Charges for services, $7.7 million projected adjustment to budget. So ending the year at $21 million versus a $13.4 million budget. A lot of this has to do with our ambulance fees. I've talked about this, but there's a federal program, the Ground Emergency Medical Transport Program, the GMET program. It's related to Medicaid runs. It's a cost recovery program, and it's had a tremendous impact on our ambulance fees. So just rolling down to the bottom, $123 million initial budget, a $19 million projected adjustment, where we're removing out that top line. I should have mentioned this. Use of fund balance, use of reserves. We utilize that. It's like, I hesitate to say this, but it's almost like a plug number in our budget so that we can show our revenues matching our expenses. So if we have a year where we're going to utilize reserves, utilize savings, we show that as a use of reserves. It's not real revenue, it's historical revenue. So when we're looking at projected year end and we're going to show you a net, it's not revenue, we're utilizing reserves. So a $19 million adjustment showing year ending projected general fund revenue of about $142 million. Next slide, please. So the expenditures of the general fund, same format, budget, and this budget can get revised during the year based on budget amendments. year-to-date actual, percent of budget used, and then we have a projection adjustment related to the budget to try to get it a projected year-end number. So highlighting, we'll run through a couple of these, highlighting some of the variables. We added some staff. We've had a lot of discussions about staff, getting our staff back up to levels that the city had around 2010 before we had a large reduction. So $867,000 increase over original budget. It is being offset by a reduction in benefits. We had an IMRF rate change. Those kind of go up and down year to year, but it's offsetting that increase. I'll roll down to capital expenditures. We're projecting to be under by $1 million. That's not due to pricing. That's due to supply chain issues. So we haven't been able to buy equipment this year. I've talked several times about we can't control expenses, but we can manage them. This is one of those expenditures where it was difficult to kind of do either one. You know, they're getting rolled out to the next year. We did do some budgeting in FY24 for equipment expenditures. We knew we were not going to be able to execute in 23. So $1 million reduction there. One of the examples we've had in the last few months about controlling or managing expenses was a delay in the lake maintenance building at Lake Bloomington. Public Works deciding that they could delay that. So, try to let pricing kind of stabilize. So that's an example of managing our expenditures. And then down at the bottom, total expenditures. So we're looking at being actually $1 million under in the projection. So the revised budget being $123 million under with a total projected of about a 121.9. And then rolling down through that projected year-end column is where we do a roll forward of our reserve balances. We discuss those a lot. GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, recommends 2 months of reserves on hand at minimum. So that's about a 16 to 18% of your total yearly expenditures. So if just rough math, if you had $100 million annual budget, that'd be 18, 19, 20, somewhere between 20 and $22 million probably. So we finished last year at $36.6 million in reserves. We finished really well. Again, it was due to those elevated revenues experiencing coming out of COVID with the hot economy, a lot of federal funds pushing the economy forward. Then we have an adjustment. I won't spend a lot of time about this, but within our expenditures is funding our pension reserve or pension obligations. We still had some dollars in reserve. That was a separate reserve of $1.1 million. So that's kind of an add back. It's not going to impact our reserves, even though it's in the expenditures. It's a little bit of a complicated subject, but it's a positive adjustment. And the one thing I didn't mention when we went through revenues is last year at the end of the year during our audit, and then council was made aware of this, our ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act dollars that were unutilized at the end of the year were taken out of the income statement and basically put into a deferred revenue account. So it was not reflected in our opening reserve balance of 36.6 million. This year, all revenues were received. It's going to get pushed into revenues. So it's going to increase our projected year-end reserve balance. But those revenues are already targeted, and much of them have actually already been officially approved by council. So I'm showing that adjustment at the bottom here. We're showing it to give visibility on kind of the larger items coming off that larger $58.3 million projected year-end general fund reserve balance right now. Last month, we showed 51 million, and I covered the transfer to Locust Colton that we were anticipating doing prior to year end, but Locust Colton got bumped out into fiscal 24. So I know there's a lot of information, but tying these numbers together that we're putting out here for the community. This month, we're showing the economic and community development ARPA programs that were just put into place. May 1st, they went live. So that was the socioeconomic and the economic development dollars. So we had 3.5 million. This is the parentheses kind of down at the bottom. It's a little hard to see. Of the $5.5 million adjustment for ARPA, 3.5 million for ECD programs, that the grant programs that are in place now. And then another targeted $2 million for Locust Colton phase 4 and 5 that we had discussed with council back in January. And then the other item we had discussed with council back in January was a $3.9 million additional subsidy for Locust Colton phase 4 and 5 out of the general fund. And that was to allow for the water sewer storm and sewer storm funds not to have to borrow to support that Locust Colton Phase 4 and 5 project, and it was going to save over $3 million in interest costs. So right now we're projecting a $58.3 million year-end reserve, the general fund, but with $9.4 million of that being targeted already, it really shows about a $48.9 million available reserve balance. And I think last month I discussed it would be a little right around 48 million. So it's up a little bit from that. My comments about that is it provides us flexibility to have the discussions that we've been putting off for a while about fire stations, public works, fleet garage, it's things of those nature that we potentially would not have to borrow for, given this fortunate position we're in. Next slide, please. And then this exhibit is not a full-blown income statement. This is a summary review that we do of the enterprise funds. Jumping to the bottom, you can see the revenue trends, 100% right across except for the arena. Those fee-based funds, they track really well because they're based on consumption, and year to year, the consumption of the city, unless there's large developments that come in, track pretty evenly. So with this, the year-to-date gain loss, the blue line there, the line right above it is POs. When we do our budgetary reporting, we take out commitments that are in purchase orders, encumbered funds, those have been approved by council. And then we show a year-to-date gain loss after encumbrances. Some of those are positive, like solid waste shows $1 million positive, but we still have a month, a payroll, a single payroll to accrue back into the fiscal year. We know the numbers for the larger numbers for the larger final payroll of April that was paid in May. But then there was like one day in this last pay period that's going to get accrued back too. So we wait and do that final accrual once all that information is known. So next month, we're going to be pretty close on the expenditure side. We'll still have another month of sales tax revenues to come in. But in general, for the enterprise funds, the revenues tracked well. Some of them were impacted by higher expenses, but we are trying to manage those expenditures via timing related to capital projects and some equipment purchases. One thing I'll highlight is, with the arena, while it's at the 76%, I think 100,000 of the year-to-date actual is from a State Farm sponsorship, but for having that be kind of in the state of flux, having $700,000 in revenue for the arena, I think is a positive number to highlight. So next slide, please. And then the location of these reports, they're on the website. The easiest way to do it is just go to the website, go to the finance department, annual budget, monthly reports. And you can see these reports and some more detailed reports on each fund. And at that, I'll pause for any questions or comments. Sorry for the longer rendition there.
Saying any question? Oh, Councilmember Bowen.
Thank you. For the brevity, I just want to say that.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Doesn't look like we have anybody else. Thank you so much, Scott. Great job as usual. Now we're going to move on to Deputy City Manager's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a couple items tonight. A few slides to show the first one, and you'll see a theme of steampunk running through some of the slides tonight. But first to mention the downtown Bloomington Farmers Market will be around the downtown square on May 27th, 7:30 to 12. Then we also have the June 1st Friday will be the Hunt for the Airship. Next slide. And then we start to really get into the COGS and Corsets events that will take place between June 2nd and 4th. There are tickets on sale at the website shown there. A big festival downtown every year. Mayor dresses up, I believe, correctly. Is that right?
No.
No. This year, though, you've committed to dressing up.
Maybe.
All right, we'll see. Next slide, please. Final slide here is a free concert on June 10th. It's the Hairbangers Ball that will be on the Museum Square in downtown Bloomington. Again, takes place on June 10th at 7 PM. Starts at 6 PM. The concert starts at 7 PM. So a few things going on downtown. A couple other announcements tonight. The city manager is actually, it took 3 years to get to him, but finally got COVID. So he was not able to attend tonight. Didn't even feel like attending remotely, which says something if you know the city manager. Our other deputy city manager, Billy Tias, also had COVID. So that's why he was virtual and remote tonight. So unfortunately, you got stuck with me, but both are certainly hearing their thoughts. Finally, wanted to announce tonight that the city manager has appointed Chris Spanos to be the new corporation counsel for the city. Chris currently serves as the first assistant state's attorney in McLean County, has a lengthy resume, has served in a lot of different capacities throughout his career. I think he said he has over 100 jury trials under his belt, very well versed in local government law. And so we're very excited to him to begin with the city. We've promised the county a smooth transition. We're looking at June 12th as his start date. And so again, we're just really looking forward to that and excited that we were able to get that type of talent to come over to the city. And with that, that is all I have.
Okay, thank you so much. And I know you're very excited about Chris coming on board because then you can relinquish your hat as a city attorney. So, yeah, so congratulations to both you and Chris. And for the sake of brevity, the only thing that I'm going to say is just thank Councilmember Bolin as usual for stepping in for me last week as I wasn't feeling well either. It wasn't COVID, but really thank you. And also thank Councilmember Montney as well, because she stepped in for me for another event that I had to attend to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to council members to see if you have any comments. Okay.
I had one really quick thing. In our consent agenda, we approved some appointments and reappointments. And so a resident was checking out our website and caught some discrepancies. So I thought I'd draw attention, mostly because this is a pitch also for people to check out where we have vacancies in different committees. But I don't know, on the website, there are different things that list, like the Convention and Visitors Bureau says that there's 3-year terms, but then under when the expiration of those terms is, it lists it as none. There was one for Economic Development Council that listed Terry Renner as the representative with an expiration date of December 2019. And there are a couple others, but one, to draw attention to, but two, to reach out to the community to say that we do have vacancies in different boards and commissions.
All right. Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Bolin?
I'll make a motion to.
Okay.
Adjourn.
That's a great comment.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.